She was just taking an order. She had no idea the man watching her was about to change her entire life. My name is Andre. I am 35 years old. I built my first company at 26, sold it at 29, and have spent the years since running an investment group that operates quietly and moves carefully. I wear grey suits and purple ties because my mother once told me that purple was the color of people who thought before they spoke. I have tried to be that kind of person. I do not always succeed, but I try. My mother's name is Irina. She is 68 years old, and she is the most elegant person I have ever known. Not elegant in the way that requires money, though she has been comfortable for many years now. Elegant in the way that is entirely internal, the way she holds a room without asking for it, the way she listens with her whole face, the way she has never once in my memory made another person feel small. She has silver hair that she wears pinned back simply, pearl earrings she has owned since before I was born, and a green dress she saves for occasions she considers worth dressing for. My mother has been deaf since she was 41. A progressive condition that moves slowly at first and then, over the course of about 3 years, took her hearing completely. She learned sign language in her early 40s with the same patience and precision she brought to everything. She became fluent. She adapted. She never complained, not once, in a way that was meant to be heard. She simply continued, the way she always had. What she lost, and what she has never entirely recovered, was the ease of moving through the world without depending on someone else to translate it. Not because she could not communicate, but because so few people on the other side of the conversation knew how to meet her. She would gesture, or write on her phone, or rely on me to interpret, and most people would respond with an exaggerated slowness or a particular kind of loud sympathy that she found more isolating than silence. She did not say this often, but I knew. A son always knows the things his mother does not say. On a Thursday evening in late September, I took her to dinner at Voronov's, a restaurant in the older part of the city that had been there for 40 years and had managed to remain exactly what it was without becoming either outdated or self-conscious about it. White tablecloths, gold wall sconces, the smell of good food and warm bread. My mother loved it there. She said the room felt like it had been designed by someone who understood that people came to restaurants not just to eat but to feel that the world was, for one evening, unhurried and gracious. We were shown to our usual table. My colleague Boris was with us that evening, a man I had known for 12 years, who had the particular talent of being comfortable in any room and the equal talent of knowing when to be quiet. He sat across from my mother and smiled, and she smiled back. They had always liked each other without needing much language between them. The waitress came to our table a few minutes after we sat down. She was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark brown hair pulled back neatly, a blue uniform, a white apron. She had the focused and quietly attentive manner of someone who was good at her job and took it seriously without making a performance of it. She introduced herself and began to describe the evening specials with a clear and unhurried voice. My mother was watching her. I was watching my mother, ready to interpret, ready to do the small invisible work I always did in these moments. And then something happened that I was not expecting. The waitress paused. She looked at my mother, not in the careful pitying way that strangers sometimes looked at her when they realized she had not responded to something spoken, but with a different kind of attention. She looked at my mother's hands, which were resting on the table in the particular still way they rested when she was waiting to communicate. She looked at my mother's face. And then, without saying anything, she set her notepad down quietly on the table. And she began to sign. Not slowly, not haltingly, not the way a person signs when they have learned 3 phrases and want credit for knowing them. She signed with the fluency and natural rhythm of someone for whom it was a real language, her hands moving with the ease of thought, her face carrying the expression that gives sign language its tone, her eyes staying connected to my mother's throughout. She introduced herself again, this time in my mother's language. She said her name was Natasha. She said good evening. She asked how my mother was feeling tonight. She said she was happy to sign the entire menu if that would be helpful and that she would be at the table for the whole evening. My mother's face changed. I have watched my mother navigate the hearing world for 27 years. I have seen her smile in the polite way she smiled when she was being patient. I have seen her laugh at things Boris mimed for her. I have seen her content and warm and gracious in the way she always was. But I had not seen her face do what it did in that moment for a very long time. She looked at Natasha with an expression that was not just surprise. It was something closer to recognition. The particular feeling of being seen in a way you had stopped expecting. She signed back immediately, Her hands suddenly animated in a way they had not been all evening. She said she was very well and that this was the most pleasant beginning to a dinner she had experienced in longer than she could quite remember. She asked Natasha how she had learned to sign. Natasha smiled and signed back that her younger sister had been born deaf. She said they had grown up signing together and that it had always felt to her less like a language she had learnt and more like one she had simply always had. My mother reached out and touched Natasha's hand briefly, lightly, the way she touched things that mattered to her. I sat across the table and watched this and could not speak for a moment. Boris, beside me, was looking at the tablecloth with the particular focus of a man who is trying not to show that he is moved. Natasha took our orders with complete ease, moving between signing for my mother and speaking for Boris and me without breaking her composure or making anything of the transition. She brought bread and water. She checked back at the right intervals, not too often, not too infrequently. She and my mother exchanged small comments twice during the meal, once about the soup and once about something that made my mother laugh, a real laugh, the kind that does not require sound to be entirely present in a room. When she came to clear the plates before dessert, I asked Natasha quietly if she had a moment. She said of course. I asked how long she had been working at Voronov's. She said 14 months. I asked if she had always worked in restaurants. She paused briefly and then said she had been working in hospitality since she was 20, that she had put herself through a part-time communications degree over 4 years while working full-time, and that she was currently applying for positions in community outreach and accessibility coordination, but that the field was competitive and in the meantime Voronov's was a good place to work. I asked what specifically she wanted to do. She thought for a moment, the honest kind of pause before an honest answer. She said she wanted to work on making public spaces and services genuinely accessible to deaf and hard of hearing communities, not in the checkbox way that organizations sometimes did accessibility, but in the real and specific way that actually changed how people move through the world. She said she knew what it meant to watch someone you loved feel like an afterthought in a room that was not designed to include them. She said it simply, without asking for anything. I told her my company's foundation had been developing an accessibility and inclusion initiative for the past year that had not yet found the right person to lead its community program development. I told her it was not a restaurant. I told her it required exactly the combination of things she had just described. I asked if she would be willing to come in for a conversation the following week. She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked at my mother, who had been watching the exchange from across the table with her quiet and complete attention. My mother signed to Natasha. She said, "Give him a chance. He is slow to say what he means, but he usually means something good." Natasha laughed. I did not need to see the signs to understand what my mother had said because Natasha's laughter told me. She came in the following Tuesday. The conversation lasted 2 hours. She was precise and thoughtful and had ideas that were specific enough to be real and flexible enough to be practical. She asked better questions than most people I interviewed who had twice her experience. She was offered the position before the week was out. At the foundation launch event 8 months later, my mother stood at the front of the room and signed her remarks while Natasha stood beside her and voiced them for the audience. They had practiced together. They moved together like people who had found a particular and valuable rhythm. Afterward, my mother found me in the crowd and signed to me. She said that the evening at Voronov's had been the last time she felt like a guest in a room that was not quite designed for her. She said that from that night forward she had felt like someone who belonged in every room she entered. She said Natasha had done that. Not by changing the rooms. By changing what it felt like to be in them. I thought about a Thursday evening. About a young woman who set her notepad down and began to speak in a language she had grown up with because it was the right thing to do and there was no other calculation involved. About how that single unremarkable act of genuine inclusion had moved in every direction from that table like light from a single source. The world does not always need grand gestures. Sometimes it needs one person in a blue uniform who sees another person clearly and responds in the language. That is enough to begin everything. If you know something that can make someone feel less alone in a room, use it. You do not know who is watching. You do not know what it will become. You only know that it is the right thing, and that is always enough reason.